Елена Ивашко, радио «Голос России». Вы в своем творчестве не раз обращались к жанру триллера, криминальной драмы. Расскажите, пожалуйста, каковы источники вашего интереса к исследованию именно темной стороны жизни? И считаете ли вы, что такое кино более нужно людям, чем, допустим, светлые, добрые истории? Спасибо.
Well, first of all, I think that all cinema is important, that diversity, to be able to have all kinds of films that are musical films, drama, what have you. But, you know, I basically, at my age now, recoil from any genre. I think, you know, my genre is life, and life is a horror film, a love story, a comedy, a suspense thriller. So you know, I reject the idea that the audience should go to a film and expect to see a certain kind of film with certain rules. And if that's the expectation, then I will try as best I can to bend the rules to suit the questions I'm interested in.
Добрый день, Френсис Форд Коппола, я здесь. Здрасте. Рад вас видеть, спасибо за фильм, замечательный. Скажите, пожалуйста, видите ли вы, как утверждают критики, в своих последних фильмах свои личные переживания, свои личные биографические факты ваших последних трех фильмов, когда вы стали работать уже в независимых студий? И еще довольно странно то, что этическая история вам приснилась в такой мусульманской стране, значит ли это то, что вы считаете, что мир сейчас настолько объединенный, что можно такую историю хоть в Сибири, хоть в Китае? Спасибо.
What was the first part of the question? It had two parts. The first part was...
Автографический вот фильм получается такие.
Well, you know, my desire is really to approach film and cinema as much as I can, humbly speaking, as literature. And my experience is that the beautiful work, certainly in the novel and in the theater, somewhat reveal much about the life of the author. I don't think it's necessarily autobiographical, that's a different thing, but you know, we know that, for example, Thomas Mann, when he wrote Buddha's books, it was a family like his, or Flaubert's work expressed certain things, and even as we were talking yesterday, Turgenev, you know, his great love for the beautiful opera singer was reflected in his work. So, in fiction, in literature, you express what you know and what you feel about life, and I think as a reader or as an audience, that's what you want. You want to have a sense of the soul of the author, which is why I think it's so important that you write the work, not just adapt it from a book or if you adapt it from, for example, a historic incident, that you do lots of research, because the research tends to reflect what your personal stake in it is. So I don't think the work I intend to do from now on is autobiographical, but it's very, very personal. On the second question, you know, I was in my bed in Istanbul after drinking too much raki, and I had this vivid dream, and what was interesting about an Islamic country is that there was the call to prayer at 5 o'clock in the morning, so it woke me up just as in my dream Edgar Allan Poe had appeared to me. I didn't invent the idea to have the figure of Edgar Allan Poe appear. He appeared in my dream, and that's when there was the Muslim doing the call to prayer on the loudspeaker, and I woke up and I was very, I said, no, I have to sleep, I have to see what's the end of the story, you know, and of course I could never go back to sleep. Instead I recorded what part of the dream I had. I remembered it very well. And that was the part, if you've seen the movie or when you see the movie, the part from when he's walking in the forest and the little girl has big teeth and braces and says, oh, you're looking at my teeth, and so I hate my teeth. And then they go to this place in the forest, and the children, or all, he doesn't want to step on the grave, and the little children come out of the grave and play in the moonlight as though it's the afternoon. And then the appearance of Edgar Allan Poe, and that's when the Allah is mighty came through the window, you know, woke me up. So that part of the movie then enjoys very much like a dream. But yes, the world is becoming so similar that wherever you are, your world is with you, because you know, when I was a kid, I lived in New York, and New York was so different than California. It was like a different country. They didn't have the same kind of stores in California when I went, and when I ate an avocado in New York, all the boys would tease me that I ate weird food. So the difference between California and New York was amazing, and now there's less difference between, you know, where I live in California and Moscow. So the world has truly, you know, become very, very similar, and there has definitely been a U.S. Apple invasion wherever I go. So I must say I'm sad, because I love the differences of the world and the different culture and the different traditions, and I somehow want, it's nice that it's comfortable, that you're familiar everywhere, but I love the cultural differences, of course. I think that's so valuable to preserve.
Добрый день, Сусанна Альбирина, Российская газета. Во-первых, я счастлива, что вижу вас, потому что ваш фильм, например, «Бойцовская рыбка», Рамбо Фиш, свое время меня перевернул еще до остальных ваших шедевров. Но спросить я хотела о двух других вещах. Вчера отмечалась дата, которая касается Марго на Брандо, и раз уже это совпало, по-честному, я бы попросила вас несколько слов сказать о нем. И второй мой вопрос к вам касается, у нас сейчас очень много фильмов ужасов, мы ожидаем премьеру фильма «Ворон», где тоже будет Эдгар Аллан По. Вы не видите в этом тенденцию какую-то? И, Фрэнсис, я прошу прощения, Игорь, у меня к вам тоже вопрос, поскольку микрофон у меня в руках. Мне очень интересно проекты вашей компании, и кого вы еще планируете привести? Возможно, это будет Фон Карвай или Колин Фаррелл. Спасибо.
Well, Marlon Brando briefly was a unique man. He was, of course, we know him as an actor, but he was kind of a genius just as a man. The things he was interested in, the things he would talk about were very eccentric, you know, and curious. He was like a big child in a way. And because he was so famous so young, he didn't care what people think. He liked children, he liked animals, he liked people who were very direct and simple, who didn't talk about intellectual things, especially about acting. But I as a drama student, I of course admired him, because he and Tennessee Williams and Elia Kazan were the heroes of us who were drama students. But you know, I really think, you know, they talk about genius very common now. Excuse me. But you know, I've met a few, and there are only a few, and I would think he was one of them. Not so much because he was a great actor, but because of the things his mind and what he was interested in talked about. You know, you talked about there being so-called horror films. I don't really think that my film Twix is a horror film. I think it's I used the horror genre because it was something that I had begun with when I was 22, and I made my first films, and of course they were of this genre because it was possible as a young person first to get the opportunity, and also this type of film was very forgiving about a young filmmaker doing unusual things with the camera, you know, putting the camera under the table or swinging it or doing whatever you wanted, because this type of story was contained and absorbed it. So in this film I was interested in taking what I was doing when I was 22, but at 72, which is my age now, to use it more in a film with a personal, not autobiographical, but personal understand some things about myself. And as for the films of my colleague here, maybe you can speak to that. Well, you know, I always enjoy my time in Moscow and in Russia. I had different trips over the years, and I find that people are extremely kind and welcoming, and I enjoy that very much. It's true I've been to several specific polytechnic museums researching a subject for what my next work is, which is a much bigger film. And it's interesting, I made these 3 little films in a sense to try to end my career so that I could approach a different career. I felt that, you know, it's very hard when you made a very successful film in your 20s, it's very hard to compete with that because you will never, you know, I'll never make a film like The Godfather or possibly Apocalypse Now or that, although those films became successful over 40 years, it wasn't as if they had wonderful reaction in their time. Over many years, it became clear that people were still watching them and found something in the films that enabled them to still have an audience 20, 30, even 40 years later. So when people say to me very often, oh, why are your films, they're not as good as they used to be, you know, when you made those films, the truth is that those films weren't considered so good. So we have to wait, you usually have to wait some time to understand what really effect the film has. But I am doing a research on a very bigger, much bigger original screenplay with some personal aspects, though not autobiographical, and that involves some study for me about what I felt were some of the most important themes of my era. You know, we all come into this world, and if you look at any of you, if you look 20 years before you were born, and 20 years after you're gone, that's kind of usually about 100 years. And usually that era has a certain theme to it, or point, you know, or you can almost speak about it in a few words, and that's what I'm interested in now. What would those few words be about my era? I was born in 1939, so if you say, okay, 1920s through the 2020s, what was that era? How could you, when you think of it, you know, and just for a second, not to include the Second World War, because it's easy to say, well, the Second World War was good, but not including the Second World War, what was that era? What do you consider the main thing? That's what I'm studying now and why I went to some of these places. But what I have in mind is not to be shot in Russia. I think it would be shot in New York, in fact. It would be a big film, and it would be in those periods that I said, the 20s, the 30s, whatever.